On May 7, 1945, after 6 catastrophic years, the war in Europe ends with the unconditional surrender of Germany. To prevent Germany from causing any additional harm, the country was divided between the 4 Allied powers. The western part of Germany was distributed between Britain, France, and the United States, while the eastern portion was given over to the Soviet Union. The separation of Germany and the division of Berlin highlighted old tensions that had previously existed between the Allied leaders, especially between Premier Stalin of the Soviet Union and President Truman of the United States. Stalin wished to take advantage of his new presence in Germany and use it as an opportunity to expand communist influence into Western Europe. Stalin had a reputation for ruling with a heavy hand, using repressive political actions, and viewed East Germany and Berlin as spoils of war and stripped it as his payment. The Western Allies were in agreement to focus on their efforts on rebuilding Europe as quickly as possible under the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan. These conflicting approaches of Stalin and Truman created a lack of trust between the men, revealed Stalin's self-interest focus, and raised concerns that the ideological differences might cause more conflict at a future time. Over the next 12 years, there was a regular exodus of East Germans to the west. At the peak of the exodus in 1961, over 160,000 refugees fled Stalin's rule. With so many people fleeing, the already weak economy of East Germany was threatening to collapse as jobs disappeared, inflation rose, and productivity slowed. On August 12, 1961, Erich Honecker began the actions that would result in the construction of the Berlin Wall, a barrier that would divide West and East for 28 years, and reduce the rights and freedom of East Germans. The first wall was constructed mainly of barbed wire and armed guards. The wall was rebuilt 4 times with more fortification each time. By 1980, the wall was 107 kilometers long. Each of the concrete panels was 4 meters high in most places and weighed 3,000 pounds each. The maintenance of the wall cost the East German government $500 million a year. The cost to maintain the barrier strained the economy and caused psychological distress on the population. The 1980 U.S. presidential election was the first of 2 elections that would change the political landscape and lead to the shredding of the Iron Curtain. On November 7, 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected the 40th President of the United States. He launched the Reagan Revolution, a series of innovative reforms that stimulated economic growth, curbed inflation, increased employment, and strengthened national defense. He cut taxes and reduced government spending while investing in strengthening defense forces and boosted the self-confidence of the nation. This renewal of self-confidence got Reagan elected to a second term as president. As Reagan entered his second term, he committed to leaving a legacy of peace. He sought to achieve peace through strength. He wanted to improve relations with the Soviet Union, and this became possible when Mikhail Gorbachev was elected General Secretary on March 11, 1985. The superpower leaders met for the first time that November. They assembled for the Geneva Summit. This was the first Soviet-American meeting in 7 years. This meeting set the foundation of future talks on diplomatic relations and the reduction of the nuclear arms race. On June 12, 1987, on the 750th birthday of the city of Berlin, Ronald Reagan delivered a speech challenging Gorbachev to continue to pursue the reform efforts he had undertaken in the form of glasnost and perestroika. Reagan delivered the speech at the Brandenburg Gate. He sent regards and hopes to the people of East Berlin. His speech told about the rights taken away by the presence of the Berlin Wall, and also the pain the people had suffered through an enforced separation from their friends and family. He spoke of how the people of Berlin had been through 26 years of torture and how the past political leaders had failed in their responsibilities to ensure prosperity, peace, and freedom. He challenged Mr. Gorbachev with the now famous statement, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." His words touched the people on both sides of the wall and reminded them that they had the right to demand return of their freedom that had been taken away so long ago. During the next 2 years, the Eastern Bloc entered into many agreements with Europe and the United States. These agreements resulted in the release of over 35,000 political prisoners, reduced conventional and nuclear weapon stockpiles, and relaxed travel restrictions for Eastern European citizens. An unraveling of the Warsaw Pact was beginning. Polish voters elected a non-communist opposition government. Gorbachev refused to take military action. Hungarians took down their border with Austria. Again, no action taken by Gorbachev. On November 9, 1989, Gunther Schabowski declared that all travel restrictions be lifted for East Germans. Once again, Gorbachev refused to take military action. Germans on both sides of the wall began to demolish the wall and the separation it represented. This action eventually led to the reunification of Germany on October 3, 1990. Was this the end of the Cold War? 2 weeks later, on October 15, 1990, Gorbachev received the Nobel Peace Prize for his leading role in the peace, which today characterizes important parts of the international community. Gorbachev had watched the Berlin speech and saw President Reagan as a great American and leader. The speech was more than just a speech to Gorbachev. It showed him that the American, his enemy, was willing to talk and compromise to ensure that the wall came down. Previous leaders had discussed this idea of taking down the wall, but they neglected their responsibilities and did not take the necessary actions that would bring down the wall. Gorbachev's reform actions and his willingness to talk and compromise demonstrated his commitment to the end of the Cold War. President Reagan's speech brought about some unexpected result in the destruction of the Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany, the disassociation of the Soviet Union, and the independence of most of the Warsaw Pact nations, and the return of the rights for most of the people who had suffered under communism. Over the last 40 years, the U.S. and the USSR invested $20 trillion in the Cold War. Consider the economic stability, social justice achievements, and environmental restoration that can take place as future world leaders make different choices than their Cold War predecessors made. We only won when the Cold War ended, said Mr. Gorbachev. After the fall of the wall, East German citizens were given the same rights as their Western counterparts, such as owning your own property, owning your own business, freedom of religion, and freedom to travel. Change also happened in the Soviet Union. People were finally given the right of freedom of speech, religion, owning your own home, and the right to travel, and the right to choose your own destiny. The U.S. also experienced change, as people were less worried about nuclear war and the spread of communism.